Yo, I'm Oblivion, and in this video I'm going to be showing you how I process the drop vocals in my song I Want You featuring Tianda. So I'm using Logic Pro, and all the plugins I'm using are third-party plugins, so you can do this in whatever DAW you're using, or if you have similar plugins that do the same effect, you can use those as well. So let's start with this track here. These are the lead vocal chops. The vocal chops themselves were made in Melodyne in a previous session. I just kind of scanned in the lead vocal and then chopped it up, moved it around and pitched it, and then bounced it out. And so this is the entire file here. I don't know why it's chopped up a bunch of times. I think when I copied it down to this other layer, I was kind of cutting it and figuring out which parts to leave in and take out. And yeah, it's sometimes I just like to make a mess for myself. But anyway, this is what it sounds like dry. So the first thing that I have in the effects chain is a pitch and formant shifter. For that I'm using Manipulator, and I just pitched it up an octave and then moved the formant up slightly. Another cool feature of this plugin that I really like is this glide knob down here. It just kind of adds portamento between the notes, and there's also the smear function, which kind of acts as like a crossfade in between notes, and it just makes it sound much smoother. So just trying to kind of find the sweet spot there. You might also notice that this dry-wet level keeps going up and down. That's because I have some automation on it. So if I open up the automation on the track here, you'll see that I've done some padding automation, and right here is where the wet-dry effect automation is. So essentially, it's just kind of adding back in that layer of dry vocal. When I show you this other layer of the low vocal chops, depending on where it's at in the drop, there are going to be 3 layers of vocal chops. So it's just kind of to make it sound fuller. And the next thing I added was some saturation. So for that I'm using Decapitator by Soundtoys. Because there's so much energy in the drop, it's easy for the vocal chops to get lost. So saturating it just increases the harmonics to give it a little more color and warmth and add a little bit more presence so it's more noticeable in the mix. It is adding quite a bit of volume too, just because the signal was very quiet before, so I decided to boost that with this plugin. For no good reason, just because I felt like it. And then I'm using Soothe 2 to kind of tame some of the harsh resonances. When you add distortion, it makes some of the harsh frequencies louder and a little bit piercing. So I'm taming that with this plugin, which reduces some of those resonant frequencies. Well, actually, if you want to hear exactly which frequencies it's affecting, these are the ones. And then in bypass. So it's just a little less piercing with that. And then I have some EQ. I'm using Pro Q by FabFilter. So I'm cutting off all the low end because you can't even hear that anyway. And these little notches here are where some of the more prominent resonant frequencies are. So I just cut them and removed a little bit of the high end. I also have Serum effects. So this is just the effects version of Serum, and the only thing I'm really using is hyperdimension, and I'm just adding some unison detuning. This just kind of adds a little color to it and makes it sound wider. And then I also have this plugin called Wider, which is free, and it's a really useful tool if you want to get it. It's basically just making it wider, I guess. I don't know. And then I have some reverb. For that I'm using Pro R by FabFilter. So it's set up to be in like a medium-sized room. I set the decay rate all the way down to 0, and the mix is about 60. And in terms of where I wanted these vocal chops to sit spatially in the mix, they're basically like at the walls coming at you from the distance. And yeah, by lowering this decay rate, it just makes the mix sound a lot cleaner. Typically, with how energetic the drop is, you wouldn't really even hear that long reverb tail, so it's just better if it's not there. And that's just my logic behind that. You might also be able to hear some filter automation, and there isn't any filter automation happening on this track itself, and that's because it's being sent through a bus to this channel here, which is where I'm sending all of my instruments that are being affected by the sidechain. So in that channel too, there are a few different effects as well. That's just kind of affecting all of the synths as a whole. So when we take a look at the automation, there's a bunch of stuff happening here as well. So this is the filter automation. It's cutting out some of the lows and the highs. I have serum effects on it as well, and that's affecting a flanger filter. Adding all these different automations to a drop like this just kind of gives it more dimension. It's kind of pulling you in and out, and because of where I place them, it's kind of working with the drums to make them even more impactful. So that would be the lead vocal chop. If we go to this one below, this is essentially just another layer which sounds a little bit lower. So what I did to that, it's pretty similar. In Manipulator though, I just moved the formant down so it sounds deeper rather than lower in pitch. Added a little bit of saturation. I didn't use as much as the top layer just because I wanted the higher one to sound a little more present. And then some EQing, I'm just cutting out the low end wider just so it's in the same spot as the high layer, and then pretty much the same reverb. So this is how they work together. And how I decided which parts to chop out, these are working with the synths, and if I just solo this channel, you'll hear it all together. So that lower layer is kind of just supporting it when the saws are playing, and when they drop out, there's other elements that come forward, and so that's just staying out of the way to give it a little more space. So yeah, those are the vocal chops. So now I'll move on to these lead vocals, which are just phrases that I cut out from the hook and the verse, but I process more heavily for the drop. So I'll show you what's happening with those, because these are kind of underneath the vocal chop. Some of the things I did some panning automation just to kind of give the lead elements some room. So right here, it's moving from left to right, and then on the longer phrases, it's kind of circling around your head. And then just some volume automation. I just basically did some hard cuts to make it sound a little more choppy. And the reason why I didn't just cut the audio file is because there's some reverb happening. So if I were to just slice out the audio, there would still be some reverb trails, and this would just clean that up. So I've got some distortion, some delay. So this is H delay by Waves. I have this set really fast. It's on millisecond mode at 22 milliseconds, and the echoes are in mono. And what that does is it gives it more of like this metallic robotic effect. Obviously wider. This one's set a little bit more to the sides, just so that it's never going to get in the way of any of the focal elements. And then some reverb, kind of similar to the vocal chop reverb. If you're wondering why I never send these to a bus, I kind of like to just use different reverbs on individual tracks. I know people say not to do that, but I like doing it. So yeah, I can't really explain why. Well, this one here does have a longer decay rate, so it kind of puts it even further back in the space. It's not so upfront. So this channel down here has pretty much all the same effects, mainly because on this part here there's just two different layers, so I had to have two different tracks for that. And then the other thing that I did with the vocals for this drop is added a bunch of vocoders in the second half. So I'm using vocal synth for that, and don't ask me why I have 5 layers. They're all different presets and they all sound different. These 2 tracks here are just the audio tracks that are being sent to the vocoders. I don't know why there are 2. I think maybe in the previous section, like the rise into the drop, I was doing 2 different things with vocoders. So I had to do 2 different tracks, and then I kept some of the vocoders for the drop, so I just left it that way. So this one here would probably be affecting like this one and this one, but I'll go through each one to show you what they sound like. I'll start with this one here. Oh no, a couple of effects plugins on here, but this is what it sounds like by itself. First I added reverb, and then I added the EQ after the reverb, and the reason why I did that is because sometimes the reverb, and you can do this within the EQ of the reverb, it really accentuates some of the resonances in the reverb tails, and it isn't great sounding. So you can tame that, and I tried to do that here in the EQ, but I also kind of went in and made some more precise cuts, and then I also removed some of these mid frequencies. They just kind of sounded a little too nasally, and then kind of rolled off the top end. So without it, it sounds like this. All the light in the dark, give me up. All the light in the dark, give me up. So yeah, just a very lush vocoder sound. So this is what the vocoder looks like for that channel. And then this one, this layer only happens once. In this part of the drop, the vocoders become the main focal point, so they kind of just pop in for a sec. For the third vocoder here, this is what it sounds like. So this one adds more of just like an airy texture. And on my fourth layer here, that one's kind of just like a little bit more buzzy. I added some saturation to it with Decapitator. So actually, this is what it sounds like dry. Just to give it a little more drive, some reverb, and EQ to get rid of the harshness. I think I got Soothe when I was in the middle of making this song, so there's certain tracks that I could have used Soothe, then it would have been better, and I just kept it the way it was, I guess, in case you were wondering. So here's the last vocoder layer. Broken. And it only happens for that one word. In the song, I think everything cuts out and then you just hear that one word. So this one layer, I think, is just a more grittier sounding vocoder that just stands out a little better. So the tricky part is having all of these processed vocals and then all of the synths going. Yeah, the tricky part is just finding out how to get them to sit well, to all have their own place, you know? That's where some of the automation kind of comes in, and yeah, just cutting stuff, blending the different effects, and panning it, and that sort of stuff. That's just a cool way to do things, I guess. I don't know, I'm kind of rambling on here, but this is all of the vocal layers together. So the second half is definitely the busiest part of the song. I'll just show you how they're all interacting with each other now. So yeah, it's just kind of more about giving one or the other space, kind of like passing the torch around between the different voices and giving them all their own moment. And then yeah, getting that to interact comfortably with all the other instruments. Here, I'll play you the whole thing. So yeah, that's how you do that. If you have any questions, you can ask me in the comments. and I will respond. And if you want to check out the full song, it's streaming everywhere. I'll put a link in the description. I don't really know what to say at the end of these videos, so thanks for watching, and I hope that you were able to learn something from me today. Okay, bye.